the Within Orb podcast. Come get Within Orb. Welcome to another episode of Within Orb, and today we're headed into the belly of the beast, that is the East Bay, to meet swimmer and astrologer Michelle Craft. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you so much. Really excited to be here.
I'm glad that you're here. I love that you swim for a living. I wouldn't say professional swimmer because there's no competition, but I mean, I think about how much time I spend immersed in books, and sometimes I really just want to get in the water. So it's cool that you have that as a normal part of your daily life.
Yeah, I think if I sit for too long, I kind of go a little stir crazy. So I like to have a good balance of like doing some physical things and also being able to sit down and look at my computer and my books and do astrology too.
Sure. I always had this theory when I was in academia that you could do like only 2 of the 3 A's, which would be like athletics, art, academics, and then, we'll add astrology as the perma. Everybody always does astrology, but it's like you could do art or athletics or academia, but you can't do all 3 all the time.
It's really hard to do all 3.
Yeah.
I think I kind of did in high school, but yeah, it's probably my mutableness that I need to do multiple things all the time.
Oh, I love that. Yes, always multiples. Okay, so let's just get straight into it. What was the first astrology book you ever read?
So the first astrology book I ever read was Linda Goodman's Sun Signs, which is kind of a really deep end book, I think, to jump right into. But it has kind of an interesting story of how it came to me. I inherited my grandfather's copy. He passed away when I was 12, or right around the time I turned 12. And there was a box of just random belongings that got left behind that no one really had claimed, that weren't left to anyone. And Linda Goodman's Sun Signs was in that box. And I picked that up because I was interested in astrology. And so I still have the book. It's a copy from 1971 paperback. It's very well loved and a little bit torn up around the edges, but yeah, it's kind of stuck with me. I've tried my best to preserve it. Some of the cover is a little ripped in the corners and, it's seen some things. But yeah, that was my first real astrology book that kind of launched me a little bit further into learning more about the signs. Because I already had the signs memorized at that point. I don't remember. Yeah.
Wow.
I have a memory of being about 8 or 9 years old at a birthday party, and all my classmates were talking about when their birthdays were. And I remember sitting there going, okay, Taurus, Cancer. Yeah, I understand why these 2 are friends now. And sorting it and then trying to puzzle out everyone's relationships and who got along and why based on their sun signs, and kind of being I think there's more to this than sun signs because this isn't all adding up.
Right. That's so cool. And what was your grandfather doing with a copy of Linda Goodman's Sun Signs?
He was a pretty open person, spiritually. He wrote a lot of different spiritual papers and things. He was a psychiatrist in, the 60s and 70s. So he was very much into that scene in San Francisco, so yeah. You can understand. Yeah. There was also a Rider-Waite tarot deck in that box that I picked up as well. I don't really do a lot of tarot. It's definitely, I'm more of an astrology person over tarot, but I do still have it. So it was kind of an interesting inheritance, even though it wasn't maybe not intentionally on his end pictured that I would take it or end up with it, but it felt very much like a fated moment, I think, that it kind of led me on this path.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And you were making me remember when I lived in the Bay Area for 10 years in grad school, I had some kind of zoning issue, and I went to the city to talk about it because they were doing construction outside my apartment. And then the city council ended up saying the most illegal occupation in Berkeley specifically, but it's probably true for San Francisco, is people who see the practicing psychology or psychiatry at home, and they see clients at home without declaring home offices. So I'm thinking about this subterranean culture of the crossover between astrology, psychology, and home occupation without actually having the license to practice inside your home.
I bet there's a lot of that happening now since COVID, but
oh, I mean, it's the classic thing. I'm sure it's still even more amplified at this point. So
yeah.
Anyway, so we are going to go on a trip, and there's an ephemeris, but You can only take 3 books with you. And they don't have to be astrology books per se, but I'm curious about the astrology books that you would bring. So what would your 3 books be?
So the first one I think I put down was the Judgments of Nativities by Abu Al-Khayyat. Couple reasons for that one. I really love how it's very simple and to the point. It really gives you like a guide and a structure of how to delineate every house topic. And as opposed to just kind of being like a lot of traditional textbooks or books and writings are kind of just like lists of things like this is this is that. It's kind of a little bit more method based. So it tells you like, okay, you want to know about this topic. You look for the planet that indicates it. You look for the house and then you look at the lot and then you look at those together and you make a judgment and then you go from there. And it's a little bit more, yeah, I think like a little bit more of a guide than maybe some other ones are. I also really appreciate that it's quite small.
Mm,
It's very easy on the go, pocket size. You could throw in your bag. It doesn't weigh 5 pounds.
there
And
you go.
so it's a little bit for practical reasons, but it's also like my first go-to reference whenever I'm wanting to dig into like something in a chart. I always go back to this book. So multiple reasons.
So when he's talking about these ways to delineate a house topic and the judgment that's made based off of the planet or the lot, is it? It's not. I mean, when I heard you describe it that way, I'm thinking like there's a gray zone or there's some kind of ambiguity that you have to actually like interact with the rule, and it's not just applying the rule as a point blank.
Right. So they kind of tell you, or he tells you, like, of those things that you're looking at, you pick the one that's the strongest through like both essential and accidental dignity. And then that's how you decide which planet to work with in regard to that topic. And then what that indicates. So there is like that judgment that you have to make, and he doesn't make it for you. You have to use your own expertise or understanding to do that.
I love how interactive that is. That is so
Yeah.
cool.
He has this really great line at the very, very end too, where he's like, if you're going through the chart and you're getting a mixed indication of like yes and no for something, just don't say anything. It's probably not strong enough to really make a decision about it. So
That's
that's okay.
amazing.
And I was like,
Yeah.
that's so good to know. Like, that's so reassuring.
Like you don't have to talk about every single tiny thing.
Yeah. Like sometimes it's just you don't know because it's mixed.
That's like the Magic 8 Ball where it's like reply hazy, try again later. Like
Yeah.
try another astrologer who might have a different pencil sharpener.
Yeah.
Ah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many of those things where critiques of astrology are, oh, it's fated, or there's all these, determinisms, and it's not actually that. There's a lot more leeway and a lot more flexibility in interpretation.
Definitely. And I think free will is always a part of the conversation, even if you're looking at, traditional astrology, which is what I really prefer to practice. I know that like a lot of the books are very written in a very kind of deterministic feeling way, but I don't think that's really their intention. I think it's more so to just show the extremes of what an interpretation can be. And that way you can pick out the nuance based off of what you're seeing in the chart. Because I can't say I've seen many situations where I'm looking at the most extreme version of a planet, either in its best or its worst condition possible.
Right. Well, I don't know. I mean, if we go back to like swimming and professional swimming, Michael Phelps's Mars out of bounds in Cancer, possibly rising, might be an extreme that you could hang your hat on.
Sure, sure. But at least it's not like cadence, that maybe
Yeah.
would be worse. It's
Well,
not.
it might not be an Olympic medal winning.
Right.
But those extremes are few and far between, and I love that there is that maybe like that interactivity with Al-Khayyat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so what would your second book be?
So my second book I picked was Abu Mashar on the Revolutions of Years. So that's the green book. I love doing predictive work, and this book is just chock full of great interpretive information, and it's so dense. I mean, I am still going through it and like picking up new things anytime I use it as a reference, but it's just a great guide to have to kind of check myself because sometimes you forget things because there's so much to keep in mind when you're doing like a solar return. So it's a great reference to have, I think. So
Yeah. So what are some of the techniques that Abu Mashar suggests that have become indispensable for you?
I definitely like to track the profection lord between the nativity and the solar return to get a sense of how is the condition changing and how does that impact like what's happening in the year.
That's a good one. I do that
Yeah.
too. That's a really solid one.
Yeah, it really works too. My talk with San Francisco Astrological Society last November, I basically just did that, which was really cool to get really technical about it.
Did you blow people's minds?
I hope so.
I remember when I first heard a version of that rule from Demetra George, and it was like my brain exploded right there and then. I was like, oh my God. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if you have natal Venus in Libra, you're screwed.
Right. Or the opposite, like me, Venus and Virgo. Maybe I'm not screwed.
Because, you're going to catch a bunch of solar returns with Venus in Libra. You win.
Yeah,
You
right?
win the
So it's
lottery that
okay.
year. I know. I love it.
It's
Yeah.
gonna
It's
it's
like,
gonna be okay.
right. Or the Venus and Aries people, as we record this, Venus is retrograde in Aries, but they're going to get those solar returns with Venus and Pisces or Taurus. It's like, don't cry. It's fine.
If anything,
You
like at
know?
least you have two good like Venus situations on either side,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. All right. Well, I'm glad to know I'm not alone in employing that. I do it every time I do a chart.
Yeah, so
So,
do I.
yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Imagine stepping into a room of 5,000 astrology books, turning a corner and stepping into a room of 2,000 more. The Celestial Arts Education Library is every astrologer's dream, and it can be yours. I invite you to come support CAELi before you can visit physically. Your support will mean the creation of 52 new episodes of Within Orb next year, 4 issues of the CAELi Review, our inaugural journal, and countless book talks, events, classes for our community. Visit our website, www.caeli.institute/support, to select your level of care. Please help support CAELi into the future, our future, so that we may study the future together. Thank you for listening. Please enjoy the rest of the show. Okay, so what was it be another kind of takeaway from Abu Mashar that is a
I
go-to?
would say the Fardars for sure. I definitely track the Firdaria period lord as well. There's some good interpretation or translations of that in this. I also like to use Dr. Ali Alomi's translations for the Fardars as well. His are a little bit more fleshed out than the Green Book. I think just because he's pulling from more than one source in that one. So yeah, I think the Fardar period also is really important to get an idea of what's happening for someone that year. So both of those kind of combined techniques bring in a lot of really good information.
Amazing. That's really, really, really cool. I love how Chris Brennan's Hellenistic Astrology is becoming known as the Blue Book, and now Abu Mashar's version from Ben Dykes is becoming known as the Green Book. And also at CAELi, like there's a special color of astrology book purple on the
Oh, really?
covers. Yeah, like a lot of these books
Oh,
are like, if you squint your eyes and look in the room, it's like, oh, there's that purple everywhere.
that's funny.
So I'm thinking
Yeah,
like, maybe Demetra's 2-volume set will be like the brown books, and then
right. You have your
we'll have like the
iconic
whole
colors.
rainbow.
The
Yeah.
rainbow, yeah.
Yeah, who's
Love
gonna
it.
do the yellow book,
Yeah, we'll see. That's an opportunity for someone to get in there.
There we go. There we go. Okay, so what is your third book?
So my third book that I picked is called The Heavenly Writing, Divination, Horoscopy, and Astronomy in Mesopotamian Culture by Francesca Rochberg. I picked this book because if I have just astrology text manuals, I'm going to go nuts on this island.
Mm-hmm.
I need something a little different. And this is a book I wouldn't say I've read it fully cover to cover at all, but I've definitely read sections of it and it's really fascinating. The premise is really just to kind of disprove a lot of the writings about ancient people, specifically Mesopotamian understanding of astrology and astronomy, that were kind of put out in the 60s, basically saying that ancient people didn't know anything. And so this book is kind of the response to that, being like, actually, they knew a lot. And it's kind of crazy how much they knew. And so it gets into some of the horoscopy that you can find that we have material culture of still from that period, from the Mesopotamian culture. And it just is really fascinating to see, at the end of the day, we were all asking the same questions. Like, do they like me? When am I ever going to find love? You know,
Oh,
what's my purpose? Things like that.
I've never put those questions together with the image of the Babylonian on the ziggurat, observing the stars, participating in creating the Enuma, Anu, Enlil, that sort of big 700-year compendium, in the
Yeah.
context of, do they like me? Will I find love? Like,
Yeah.
oh, wow, maybe we
Am I going to
haven't
get the thing?
changed. Yeah, right? Like, oh man, yeah. So there has been some recent findings actually of some trigonometric tablets of the Babylonians that precede what we knew as like the first trigonometries, which I think is pretty cool. So,
Wow.
but you're right. Like Francesca was the first person to throw the gauntlet and say, "Hey, let's take another look." And
Yeah.
I think it's the first page of that book. She says what the English title says is on heavenly writing, but it's in Babylonian. It's Satir Samesh, and that phrase that she brings forward and highlights to me has always stood out in my mind, like just in the
Mm.
back of my head of just like the writing of the gods, like they're writing, you know,
Yeah.
they're sort of showing us how we can interact with them because we'll see the moon with a beard and we gotta shave it or
Right.
like, you know,
Yeah.
cower in fear or replace the king, you know.
Right, right. Yeah. So it's really cool because she gets into like omens and like kind of the astrological omens they were looking at, like eclipses, and talks about like the three main like bodies they were tracking were the sun, moon, and Venus. And so that's kind of like the eight-pointed star for Venus, like over the crescent, and then like the solar disk. And that's kind of a symbol that gets like used frequently in different things. So it's interesting to see that because I think we now like always talk about the sun and the moon, and then you have the other five planets, but they really grouped Venus in as being like right up there with, the luminaries, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and also giving her 8 points instead of now we are very attached to the pentagram and the 5-pointed Venus
Yeah.
because of the inferior conjunction pattern.
Hmm.
Very cool. Yeah, I think going back that far can be very inspiring to remind us of the more magical side of what has become, in at least like after Al-Khayyat, more technical and increasingly mathematical and even in the modern times computational with our computing, and we lose track of the actual like observation.
Right, right. And so yeah, it's kind of refreshing to get back to, some of the origins of astrology and see in a lot of ways it's not that different, and they were also tracking tables and putting out like calculations, and they knew things about the universe that to this day we're like, how did they know that? Because they couldn't necessarily have observed that, but they were able to figure things out with math. And it's just very impressive because I don't think we do math quite at that level as like the average person
Yeah, I know.
that people seem to have been doing.
Sure, sure. I definitely rely on the computer, right? And the ability to just instantly push a button and there's the chart, you know?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Guilty as charged.
Right? Yeah. Cool. Okay. So, are there any books that didn't quite make the cut?
I mean, if we didn't have to do only astrology books, I would definitely have to bring like some novels with me because I just need to I love reading stories. So having my brain engaged in like multiple types of writing, like academic and like writing, like astrology is great. And I love it, but like I kind of like to like relax with something a little bit more,
Wait, are you
less
saying
like,
astrology books aren't relaxing?
I mean, they just involve a lot of active brain power, and sometimes it's nice to go into visualization mode and picture things a little differently. So, engage different parts of my brain.
Sure. No, now I'm seeing like a historical novel slash astrological textbook embedded as a narrative onboarding. Yeah, that
Yeah, that
needs
sounds
to
right
be
up my
written.
alley.
That needs to be written. We got to have one of those because I would think like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, you really love the character and the character's learning this thing, and then suddenly accidentally you are learning it because they're learning it, and then you walk away from that novel being a budding astrologer.
right, right. Yeah, I'm always kind of keeping my eye out because I really like to read fantasy. So I'm always keeping my eye out for books that have like, if they bring in astrology, that have like good astrologer representation,
Yeah.
like that faithfully represents like what an astrologer is or what they would do and how that would
Yeah.
work. So,
I recently had a guest on the show, Alan Anand, who's written novels about this exact thing, actually, like astrologically informed stories.
That's
with,
amazing.
yeah. So you might want to check out his work.
I might have to. That's really cool. Yeah.
But I kind of thinking like, oh man, when I'm retired, I'll write that historical novel where the person's learning
Right.
astrology, but it's got like real information. Like, oh, you want to check out what's happening with, I've just been teaching a lot of derived houses recently. So it'd be like a story about derived houses. Like, I can use your chart to show you about this, you know?
That's so funny. Yeah. Yeah, I've had similar thoughts too, where I'm like, okay, what if like the characters like need to know something and they do a horary or something, and then you can
Yeah.
like teach someone how to do that, but like
Where's
through
the
a
body?
story.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
whatever it is.
Oh, and it would be so good actually if like you bring in some Jeffrey Cornelius and they find out the entire time that their atomic clock was off, so the whole entire world's timing was actually
Oh my
off.
God, that would
And
be
then they're
such a
like, but
nightmare.
we found the bodies anyway. How did we do it? And like Jeffrey Cornelius comes down on a deus ex machina and is like, hello, wrong charts can work.
Oh my God.
Okay. So if you were going to put a beginner onto the path of becoming an astrologer, what books would you recommend?
A few.
Okay.
On the Heavenly Spheres is a great introduction. So I did like official like astrology courses under Sam Reynolds. That's the book that we used in that course. It's just a great reference. It kind of has like everything that you could need in one. It's like whatever every planet can be if you're like looking at colors, plants, whatever meanings. Like it has kind of everything there. It kind of summarizes like most techniques that you can think of. And so it's a really great place to kind of let like everything in one area, I guess, one book, and goes through the basics pretty well. I'm really partial to Chris Brennan's book, Hellenistic Astrology, A Study of Fate and Fortune, or AKA the Blue Book, apparently.
Yeah. Well, like the other thing is On the Heavenly Spheres is the other blue book.
That's
So
true. They are both blue. So there's the dark blue book, which is Chris Brennan's, and maybe the more teal sky blue that's on the Heavenly Spheres.
So you're like, okay, I'm going to put you on the blue diet, and then you can graduate to the green diet.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, so Chris Brennan's book I like because I think it has a really good history of astrology. It's like a third of the book is just the history part. So, but also a really good introduction to Hellenistic astrology, and just I really like his translation of Valens personally as well. So, he translated Valens for all the planets and the meanings. So, it's so a really great kind of like jumping off point. If you're like a beginner, like you don't really necessarily want to be an astrologer, but you just want to get to know more astrology, I really like Chani Nicholas's book, You Were Born for This. That book is really great just to kind of get a feel for like the very basics of like sun, moon, rising. But if you're trying to be an astrologer, you probably want something a little bit more than that. But that's just a great introductory book. And then the last one I think I pulled up was Michael Bryan's Mastering Traditional Astrology, which I think of as kind of like an advanced beginner book. What I really like about it is he does a really good job of breaking down the astronomy of astrology. And I think that is really, really great to understand as a beginner. So you can really understand how we're interpreting like visual phenomena to mean something in the chart. So
Yeah, he's also very good at creating narratives that help you with a memory palace approach. Like I remember one live class he was teaching, but I think this comes across in his writing, is like writing in a way where you're going to remember it.
Yeah. He definitely has a very strong like narrative voice too. Like it really comes through. It's even though it's like it's definitely like looks like a textbook, it is a textbook, but his voice is very strong. So you definitely feel his personality come through in his writing.
So good. Well, I'm so glad that you took time to be with me on the show today. And what are you up to these days, and where can people find you?
I am just doing consultations and seeing clients. That's kind of my main thing right now. So I have my website, which is soulhealingwithmichelle.com, which is where I take bookings. And I also practice at a store where I have like a contract kind of situation set up in Alameda locally here with a store called Feathered Outlaw. So I do readings there in person.
Wow.
So I often take like walk-ins. I'm doing a lot of like I've never met you before. I'm sitting down with you. I'm looking at your chart for the first time and then doing a reading on the spot. So
wow.
that's kind
How
of
long
really,
does it take you to prepare for that when they just walk in? Are you you're looking at it and you're like, all right, here we go.
yeah, that's it.
Wow.
Depending on the reading, if sometimes people book in advance and then I'll try and get their information in advance so I can do a little bit more detailed work depending on what kind of reading they want to do. Because I do offer like solar returns through them, so that has to be in advance. But if it's just like a natal chart reading, people are just sitting down, walking in, and I'm pulling up their chart in the moment and going for it.
Amazing.
So
keeps you sharp. Keeps you
it
sharp.
really does. And it's one of those things where it's really cool to test, like, you know, different techniques in a way. Like, I mean, I can only do so much in the moment that I can remember, but just the really basic interpretations, like I usually stick with ascendant, moon, Mercury kind of as my basis. And it's really amazing how those things always seem to really hit in the track in the moment. So like, I'm always like, does that resonate? And people are like, that's crazy.
How did you know that?
Yeah.
Like,
and
I'm not a psychic, I promise.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. That's just literally what the chart says.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah, those are really fun times. I've only been able to do that once in a while and only for a day at a time. So I am proud of you, or like very in awe of this
thank you.
like ongoing relationship, because I would be like, I'm exhausted after a single moment. And it's like, I'll take 3 years off of doing that in person.
I did I went out to do an event through them at a local university. That was for like, it was like for like a Halloween party or something where I was doing readings. I did like maybe like 30 something on the spot readings, like back to back with no stop. It was just like a line of students.
Did you just get into a trance in your mind at that moment?
I did.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't know what I've told anyone. I couldn't tell you. I've just looked at so many charts.
I love it.
And they weren't long readings. They were probably like 10 minutes where I was just like, you have this is what this means, da, 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 da. And then people are just like, okay, wow. And like walking away. And so Amazing. At the end, I was like, well, at least I feel confident now doing blind readings because I just did more than I've ever done in like 2 hours.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So that was crazy.
Definitely, definitely. Well, thank you so much for being here. And it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Within Orb. If you loved this episode, share it with your friends, give it 5 stars, leave a comment. In Spotify, you can do that now. To learn more about the CAELi Institute and perhaps become a member or take a lab that we teach, please go to CAELi.institute. That's CAELi.institute. Thanks again to the E-Block Band for providing our intro and outro music, and also to Jen Brown of JJ Boots Productions for being an excellent producer. If you would like to have a podcast be edited like Within Orb, reach out to Jen. This is Jenn Zahrt, signing off for now. See you next week.